Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everybody who's joined us for this webinar, the first webinar that we are going to have with NRL Australia. All the members of AATM, we welcome you all for this webinar. And before I go further, I would like to welcome and introduce our Honorable President, Dr. Navjyoti Chaudhary, sir. Sir is the President of Asian Association of Transfusion Medicine. We all know him and the entire, he doesn't need any introduction. For those who are joining late, I would hand over the mic to Dr. Navjyoti Chaudhary, sir. So please.
Thank you, Dr. EQAS. We are good friends, and thanks for your nice words. And thank you all who have joined and who are going to join, because we expect much more bigger participation. So most of the people I can see here, we know each other. Only few things I want to talk about these organizations, and we are very happy on the and I'm talking on behalf of AATM that we started this relationship with NRL a couple of months back, and this is the first activity we are having jointly. This is a joint webinar. And I'm again happy to announce that we have a written MOU amongst both organizations, and we are working for developing of the quality as well as EQAS for our member countries, mainly in the Asian region. If we talk about AATM, this is almost a 24 years old organization. We started this journey in 1999 from 5 countries. Our members, they started this organization. However, at this moment, we have got 23 member countries across Asia, starting from Turkey to Indonesia and Central Asia, Uzbekistan, up to down to Philippines. And with this membership, we have got almost 1,500 members in total from this region. And we are trying to do best because we are.
So you're mute now, sir. So you are mute.
Sorry, I think I apologize. We are, as I told you, that we have got 23 member countries. Out of that, we have got different activities, which includes 7 working groups, 14 active programs. During this program, what we are going to do with NRL. So we try to work on developing national EQAS. This is the point. We don't need conflict with any country, and if anybody they can communicate us on this request to NRL. Without taking much time, thank you our leadership from Chile, Dr. Philippa Hetzel, as well as Wayne. They are the 2 pillars for us from NRL. Of course, other scientists who will be the panelists as well as speaker. And not to say about our colleague like Ankit, then EQAS, and our members. And I think I will go back to Dr. EQAS for moderation. Thank you, EQAS.
Thank you, sir. It's our privilege and an honor to have Dr. Philippa Hetzel amongst us. Dr. Hetzel is the director of NRL for last 6 years and has previously worked as Executive Director of Operations at the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, Australia's blood service, in charge of all of Australia's blood donor recruitment, blood collections, all the testing labs, blood processing, and blood product distribution. I cannot emphasize more what an honor it is to have you amongst us, Dr. Philippa. Over to you, ma'am.
Oh, thank you so much for that lovely welcome and introduction. And it's wonderful to be here. And I can tell you that how delighted we are at NRL to be jointly hosting this webinar with the Asian Association of Transfusion Medicine. We have now a memorandum of understanding between our organisations, and we are thrilled to be able to contribute to the good work that the Asian Association is doing to transfusion medicine and improving the safety of blood supply in the 23 member states. So a wonderful achievement. You may not be aware, but NRL Australia has been a WHO collaborating centre for diagnostics and laboratory support for HIV/AIDS and bloodborne infections since 1985. That was when the laboratory was first established in Australia as part of our government's response to fighting HIV and AIDS. The laboratory's role in those early days was to work alongside the Australian Regulation Agency, the TGA, and its job was to provide reference testing, obviously, but importantly, to evaluate all of the test kits, those very new early HIV test kits, and provide also quality control materials and external proficiency testing programs for all of the pathology testing laboratories, and most importantly, the Australian Blood Transfusion Services, which at that stage were all state blood transfusion services, and I was working in South Australia. So NRL has been working in this area for over 38 years, and we're delighted to be able to share our knowledge and experience with you all. And our scientists are of the highest quality, and I know that they're going to do a wonderful job at explaining and helping and answering all of your questions. As I was introduced, I've been the director now of NRL for almost 6 years, but my background is in blood banking. And I did work for the Australian Red Cross Blood Service for many years, over 28 years. And I did finally end up really in charge of most of the organisation and had the job of forging what had been independent state-based blood transfusion service into a single organisation. So I really do understand the challenges that you all face, and that hard, very, very serious challenge of the balance between having sufficient blood and blood components while always ensuring that they are of the highest quality and the highest safety possible. And for some, that is a compromise that we understand. But at the heart of providing an effective blood supply is making sure that you have very effective donor selection and screening. And within screening, the most important pillar is the quality of the testing services on those blood donations, including for pathogens. Effective EQAS, or external quality assessment schemes, is really about providing assurance and confidence that our testing services are effective and of the highest quality possible. And we know this is critical to the safety of the blood supply, because at the end of the day, the sufficiency of the blood supply, the fact that donors will come and give their blood, traces directly back to public confidence. Do the public trust that your blood supply is safe? Countries that achieve 100% non-remunerated blood donation programs only continue to do that if the public has complete confidence in the safety of the blood components that they may receive. And that is only achieved when we can confidently say that our testing practices are effective. We all know that errors can happen, and we all know we will have junior staff that are coming in to be trained and learn their craft. And at those times, mistakes can happen. So the strength and the power of an EQAS, of a proficiency program that all staff should participate in, is that it is providing us with that independent evidence that our whole test system is safe and working properly together. So that goes right from the time the sample is received into the laboratory And given that the laboratories are often linked with the blood collection services, that the right collection has also been performed. But from that receipt right through to the interpretation of the test itself, and that all of those steps are correct. And at anywhere along that train, errors can happen. And what a proficiency testing program can do is, if you have a problem, is to help you find where it might be. So really what we're talking about is confirming the integrity of our test systems, because at the end of the day, that is absolutely vital to the safety of the blood supply and the safety of our patients for whom we are preparing those blood components. So thank you so much for the invitation for NRL to join you at this important webinar. And we hope that we'll be able to share our knowledge, and we welcome questions from you all, and we continue to work with you to improve the safety of the blood supply right across the whole of the Asian region. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on, I'll hand over the mic to Dr. Ankit Mathur. So he is Joint Secretary and the Scientific Secretary of Asian Association of Transfusion Medicine, to take the program forward.
Yeah. Thanks, EQAS. And I absolutely agree with Dr. Hazel that EQAS is an important part of whole blood transfusion system and taking care of the quality assurance in the transfusion system. And nobody can be the better person to speak or the talk on the details of EQAS other than the experts from NRL. So we all have been influenced by NRL, seen their data, seen their working, visiting their website many a time. And I have never attended NRL meeting, but I have been hearing from NRL meeting from so many of my colleagues. So nobody can be a better person, or the people talk about EQAS programs for transfusion services. So today's program, this webinar is focused on EQAS program. And to take this forward, we have Ms. Sandy Walker from NRL. She will give an introduction of NRL and the EQAS program. And she is the first speaker for the webinar. Her topic is how to develop a national EQAS. Ms. Walker is senior scientist at NRL. Her expertise in the strategies of transfusion infection testing, and she supports the EQAS development of EQAS program at NRL. We are happy to have you, Ms. Walker, here. And over to you, Ms. Walker, please.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thank you for inviting us to speak today at this webinar. We're very excited to start and improve the relationship we have, and to speak to you about the experience that we have in EQAS, which, as Dr. Hetzel said, spans over 30 years. So I'd like to share my slides, if I may. And please let me know if you can see my slides okay. Great, thank you. So the outline for the next 25 minutes for my presentation will touch on the importance of quality of testing, which Pip has already done for us so nicely. Today, we'll talk about the NRL, what our vision and goals are, and how we meet these with our specialised programs. And then we'll talk about EQAS. What is EQAS? How does it fit into our quality assurance methodology? And how is it different from quality control? Because we do know in our experience that it's often used interchangeably. So we'd like to explain that to you. And then we're going to go through the process of EQAS from an EQAS provider's perspective. So all of the things, we've divided them into 9 different elements, the 9 elements that you would need to follow to implement a high quality EQAS program. So we already heard today about the devastation when somebody has incorrect results. You know, for the patient, we know that it's anguish and unnecessary treatment if they get a false positive. And if they get a false negative result, then of course they can transmit, and there's no treatment if there was no diagnosis. But from a laboratory point of view, we also know that quality of results, or an incorrect result, it costs us money. It costs us money in repeated tests, in medical follow-up, and the additional time that you'll be putting towards that. But we also heard from Dr. Hetzel that it can impact the public trust and confidence in your services. This could mean losing registration or regulation or licensing, or even loss in business. So there's a lot of stakeholders behind these test results, and it's really important that we do what we can to ensure they're of high quality. So the NRL's mission is to promote the quality of tests and testing for infectious diseases globally. And we do that by running a number of highly sophisticated programs. We run a quality control program, and of course, we run an external quality assessment program. And we run these programs for both laboratories and also for point of care testing sites. And we really believe that the last 10 years, there's been such an increase of people using point of care tests, and there just isn't the quality assurance programs to support those. So we run our own EQAS for hundreds of laboratories from 40 different countries. But we also support national laboratories to become EQAS providers, because we know that all of the laboratories or the blood transfusion services within a country, they can't all participate in international programs. It's very expensive. And so it's really important that each of the countries have at least one, or perhaps 2 or 3, if it's a very large population, they have their own national program. And those higher level laboratories and the EQAS provider, they should then participate in an international accredited program. Philippa also mentioned about our evaluation of test kits, which we've done for many, many years. And the NRL also has specialised laboratory testing services. We also have a research and development team that specialises in improving and making diagnostics. And we have a biorepository that holds samples to support clinical trials. And we've already heard that we run annual scientific workshops, and all of this information about our workshops is online on our website, and we'd be very happy to have more participants. As you can imagine, we have many accreditations and certifications, but the most relevant to today's presentation is our accreditation to ISO 15189 and our accreditation as being a proficiency testing provider to 17043. We heard that we're a WHO collaborating centre as well. So the team that I work in, we are called the Scientific Training, Consulting and Mentoring Team, and we work with laboratories to introduce new EQAS programs for their country, or quality control programs, or quality management systems, or anything along that quality landscape. We support laboratories to do that. And we have actually done quite a bit of work with India. And in 2002, I was lucky with another colleague to go out to Mumbai and work with Dr. Narinder Naidu to set up the Indian Red Cross Society blood service, and teach her and her team how to run an EQAS program. And now they have over 150 participants, and they run that program for HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, syphilis, and malaria. And it's a really excellent program that we're happy to still be involved in. We also, this year, have been working with WHO, the Sierra office, and the WHO country office, and ICMR, to train 15 selected institutes to become EQAS providers. And we've developed a customised training program. So far, we've run 5 virtual workshops, and next week we'll be running our first in-country on-site practical training workshop. So we'll be in Pune at the National Institute of Virology to do that. And we're going to teach those 40 participants how to produce a serology EQAS panel and also a molecular EQAS panel. So we're really excited to be doing that next week. And we'll also follow on after we've done the in-house training. will be supporting virtually each of those providers to go back and set up their EQAS. So that's a brief overview of the NRL and the programs that we run. But now I'd really like to talk to you for the rest of the time about EQAS. Now, you may have also heard this EQAS being called proficiency testing. It's quite a common term, particularly in North America. But really, it is a great definition which Kate has found for us. And I just have to move my screen so I can read it to you. EQAS is a system in which laboratory results are scrutinised objectively by an outside agency in order to get a general impression of the standard of laboratory practice and to also achieve inter-laboratory comparability. So when a laboratory participates in EQAS, the EQAS provider can assess the integrity of the entire testing process. As Dr. Hensel mentioned, when a sample, an EQAS panel comes into laboratory, it has to be put into the sample accession system appropriately, has to be stored appropriately, it has to be tested on the correct assays in the correct way, and the results need to be verified or validated and interpreted correctly, and the results reported. That's why for EQAS we say it's the entire testing process, which is, you'll see in a moment, looking at a larger part of the process than quality control testing. EQAS allows us to determine the accuracy and the reliability of the participants' testing methods, and it helps identify potential sources of error and bias. So that's the most important part of EQAS, is as a provider, we can tell a laboratory if they have an error so that they can fix that error and ensure that they don't produce any incorrect test results in the future. And it allows laboratories to benchmark their performance against other participating laboratories that are perhaps using the same tests. So under quality assurance, there are a number of different terms we use, and here we wanted to show you the difference between QC and EQAS. And here in this figure, we're looking at the entire testing process. The top box shows us the specimen selection, and then the second box is all the analytical testing in the laboratory, and the lower box is the reporting and the interpretation. So we're looking at the pre-analytical, the analytical, and the post-analytical part of the testing process. And you can see that by testing a quality control sample, you're only looking at the analytical part of the process. You're asking, did I get this test run? Did it perform correctly? It's a very important question, but with EQAS, we're asking a more broader question. We're asking, when the samples came into the laboratory, did we label them correctly? Did we choose the right assays and the right testing algorithms to test them on? And then they're tested, and did we interpret those results correctly? And have we reported them correctly? So you'll hear often at NRL, we always talk about EQAS monitoring the integrity of the entire testing process. At EQAS, we are looking at the performance of testing at specific points in time. Generally, most EQAS providers would provide panels and conduct an analysis 3 times per year. And they put together a panel of samples that includes a combination of reactive and non-reactive samples. And the laboratories receive these samples, and they don't know which results are positive and which samples will be positive and which will be negative. So they're testing these panel blind. And this is very different than QC. In QC, you're testing every day, and you're actually looking to see if there's any trend in your results. You might have a QC sample of 5.2 sample to cutoffs, and you test it every day to see if your results are around that range. So the laboratory knows the composition and what result you should get for this sample. So 2 very different but very important parts of the quality assurance of the testing in our laboratories. So as an EQAS provider, they have many tasks, which you will see over the next few slides. They need to collect large volumes of samples. They need to process these samples. They need to prepare panels and validate panels. And then they send these panels to the participants. The participants test these samples and return their results back to the provider. And the provider then conducts an analysis to find out if the results reported by the participants were correct. And they should provide some good feedback that helps the laboratory with any troubleshooting if a problem was identified. Because the whole aim of EQAS is to identify and improve any testing problems. So I'd like to present to you now all of the different elements that you would need to think about and introduce and implement and control if you were going to run a national EQAS. And when we conduct this training, which we have done for more than 20 years for many, many laboratories, we have put these different processes into 9 different sections. And we'll go through each of these with you. And the first part of the process, which is a really important and significant part, is the planning of your EQAS. So if you were going to run an EQAS, you would need to first consider, what analytes will I include? And this will really depend on what the participants are testing and which participants need to participate in your EQAS. Once you've decided your analyte, you'll need to think about, what testing will I need to perform to determine if samples are or positive or negative, because it's from those results that you'll be comparing all of the laboratory results. So your testing strategies and algorithms need to be validated and of high quality. You'll need to think about what laboratories will participate in your program. What information do I need to collect from them, and how will I store this information? And when they do enroll, what information do I need to provide to them so that the participants understand their own responsibilities? You'll need to think, are you going to supply a serology EQAS panel or a molecular panel? And to answer that question, it's really important to speak to your laboratories, your clients, and work out what tests they are using. You'll then need to make some decisions about how you would transport these samples, because if there's any incorrect results reported by a participant, it needs to be because of their testing issues and not because the samples were not stable during transport. So you need to know how to ensure the quality of those panels when you distribute them all around India in the conditions and the temperature that they'll need to be included in. You'll need to consider, what consumables do we need? You'll need to order test kits and vials and labels and shipping materials. You'll need to have staff available. They'll need to be trained, and they'll need to be able to show competency. You'll need to think about, how will you manage these data? When you first introduce an EQAS, or you may start quite small with 10 laboratories for one analyte perhaps. But over time, as your program evolves, you may have hundreds of laboratories and multiple analytes. So you would need to decide how you're going to store these in such a way that they are easily able to be analysed. And you'll need to consider whether you're going to aim for accreditation, because there are some very important things about your development of your EQAS which are quite difficult to change further down the line if you decide to get accreditation. So when you're designing your statistical analysis, it would be great to check the ISO 17043 to see what they recommend. And they recommend a robust statistical analysis. So even if you're not going to go for accreditation for many years, it is still very important to check what the plan is so that you can introduce that early. The second part of the process is a sample bank. You'll need to gather a lot of samples. Where will you get these from? How are you going to process them? How will you test them? And where will you store them? Where will you store the information that you gain from the testing and managing of these samples? What volumes you have, where they are located. And then you'll need to think about how you're going to produce your panels. Every time we put together an EQAS panel, we have a particular aim. So we ask a particular question. The question may be, can you identify a certain genotype or a serotype? Can you identify samples that are closer to the cutoff? You'll come up with a particular question and you'll need to select samples that are appropriate for that question. You can use the data that you collect from participants to inform the EQAS direction. If laboratories start testing a combination antigen antibody assay, for example, you will then need to start including perhaps antigen in your panel. You'll need to think about how to prepare these panels so they're of high quality. You'll need to do segregated labeling or segregated aliquoting. You'll need to design forms that control all of the production process. The fourth point after you've made the EQAS panels is how do you assure the quality of these samples? After you've made the panels, are you still getting the results that you expected? Did you label the tubes correctly? Did you aliquot the samples correctly? Are the samples homogeneous? Meaning of your 100 samples that you have produced, do they all have the same amount of antibody or antigen? And will they be stable when you send them out? And when we're designing an EQAS panel, after we've produced a panel, we test our sample at multiple parts of the process. We test the sample after we've produced them. We test homogeneity. We test the stability after we've shipped those samples out. Then when you've made your panel and you're going to send those out, how are you going to send them to participants? What are the local regulations around sending infectious goods? And what information will you include in the package with the samples to give information to your participants? And then when the participants test those samples, what information do you want from their testing? And how are you going to collect that? Are you going to provide spreadsheets or forms? And then you'll transfer the information into a software package? Are you going to eventually design an internet-based application where laboratories can enter their results and those results can be analysed? And with EQAS, the results that you receive are quite complex. Here we're looking at a testing strategy for HIV where the prevalence for HIV is low. And so samples that are screened and they're reactive, they may have to be tested on 2 more tests. So you may have results reported from 1 test, results reported from multiple tests, and you'll need to think about which test results will you analyse and how are you going to collect those results. During the analysis, when you're analysing the participants' results, the provider will need to make a decision about what is a correct and incorrect result. How are you going to do the analysis? Will you compare the participants' results with your own results that you generated? Or will you compare the results with the other participants that are using the same test method? What statistical analyses will you do? What sort of rules do you need to have around that? And what do you do when you identify an unacceptable result? Do you call the laboratory? Do you work with them to try and help solve their issue? We really encourage laboratories to participate in educational EQAS programs, where if there is an error, the EQAS provider can help you determine what could have gone wrong so you can continue with your continual improvement. You may choose to provide a preliminary report. This is a report that you would send out before your final report, And the purpose of this is just so laboratories can have a look at what the correct results should be as soon as the closing date for acceptance of results. So this just might be a table that has your results, has the results that are reported by the EQAS provider. And then you'll need to produce a final report. And Bernadette will be talking to you a little bit about what we include in some of our reports. You'll need to include all of your EQAS processes in your quality management system, work instructions, procedures, forms, and checklists, and your staff need to be trained and checked for competency. And this is my, I think, second last slide, a certificate of participation. Your participants will want to have a certificate to show that they have participated in this program so that they can show their clients or their regulators. And also you'll need to consider, as I've mentioned, whether you'll go for accreditation with ISO 17043. So in summary, EQAS is different than QC, but both are very important. They look at different parts of the testing process and they actually work together. There's significant planning that will be required if you set up an EQAS, and it's very important that all of your processes are documented. And all testing facilities, and when we say testing facilities, we mean blood services, laboratories, point of care testing sites, should all have an opportunity to participate in an EQAS so that their incorrect results can be identified and they can be supported to improve their test results. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attention. And I look forward to your questions at the end of our sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Walker, giving an still excellent overview of the EQAS program, how EQAS provider develop their sample and how they release the samples to the participant. We will take questions at after all these three talks. Before we move next talk, I have one quick question. And can you just recommend to the participants, as a participant of the EQAS program, when they receive any EQAS sample, how do they treat the sample? Do they give some special attention? First, the sample reach to the head of the department and then to go to the lab? What should we do as a participant?
Thank you so much. So it's a very excellent question. And the whole goal of EQAS is to try and determine how your laboratory performs on their day-to-day testing. And so we're trying to mimic patient samples. And so it's very important that the participant tests these samples as they would a normal patient sample, not with their best laboratory scientists, not on their best assay, not in any special way. We find when laboratories first join, they're worried about getting the wrong result, but actually an EQAS provider should be educational and they should help the laboratory when they need help. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. With this, we move on to the next talk on this webinar. Next talk is the topic, or the next talk is how to choose high quality EQAS. And the speaker for this talk is Ms. Bernadette Portley, and she is senior scientist at NRL EQAS, and her expertise in serology as well as molecular quality assurance as well as the testing. So over to you, Ms. Portley, for your talk.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I will just share my screen. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Wendy.
Okay,
Yes,
good
ma'am.
afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the kind introduction again. So, as you are all aware now, I work at the NRL for the EQAS team. I work with Kate Zhang, who is our team leader, senior scientist, who is present with us and will also be available at the panel discussion later. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to discuss with you all today how to choose a high quality EQAS. So as an overview, I will go through in detail what to look for when choosing a high quality EQAS provider. I will discuss some of the responsibilities of the participants to help you get the best value out of your EQAS. And then I will share a few case studies and examples of some error detection that is picked up through EQAS. So there are 5 main aspects to consider when choosing a high quality EQAS. I will go through each of these in more detail in the coming slides, but the first thing to look at is to ensure that the panel samples are fit for purpose. Secondly, we want to ensure that the panel composition allows for thorough error detection. We also want to make sure that the EQAS provider has a functioning quality management system. Fourth is the analysis of the results is valid, and also to ensure that the EQAS provider gives feedback that supports the improvement of testing. So the first question to ask, are the panel samples fit for purpose? So do these panel samples include genotypes or subtypes that are representative of the population being tested? Are the panel samples similar to the patient samples with regard to the sample type received? So are they plasma samples, swabs, whole blood? Are you able to process these panel samples as you would a normal patient sample? As Sandy just mentioned before, we want to mimic how you would run a routine sample in the lab. Or are there any additional steps required in this testing process? So some EQAS providers may include samples that require an additional step in the testing process, such as samples that are lyophilized, which may require some reconstitution. As some EQAS providers may also add biocides in their panel samples to inactivate an infectious agent. However, this may interfere with assay performance. So it is important to note that EQAS providers should aim to at least provide panel samples that are representative of genuine clinical samples. The second thing to look for when choosing a high quality EQAS is whether the composition of the panel allows for error detection. So there are 2 main types of errors that are identified through EQAS: random and systematic. The number of samples in a panel can limit the capacity of an EQAS to detect certain types of errors, and the design of the panel, or how the samples are arranged, is also important in error detection. And it is also important to consider the cost of the panel and try to balance what the lab can afford along with choosing a high quality EQAS. So there are 2 main types of errors we talk about in EQAS: random and systematic. The differences between the 2 is that a random error, as the name suggests, is a random occurrence, and it is usually unpredictable and not reproducible. For example, a sample got mixed up either during reporting or during testing. The other type of error is systematic errors, and these are usually a trend or a series of errors which can affect a group of results. And systematic errors are usually easier to eliminate than random errors, as they are reproducible, so that cause can be identified and improved on. For example, a specific kit lot number may not be performing very well. So the number of samples in a panel can limit the capacity to identify a variety of possible causes. If there are less than 4 samples in a panel, depending on how the panel is constructed or designed, there is a limited capacity to identify systematic errors. However, if there are 5 or more samples in a panel, it is much more likely that multiple systematic aspects can be looked at to identify these errors. So the construction or the design of the panel samples, or how the samples are arranged, is also important in error detection. So in the example shown here, there are 3 samples in this panel. Get my pointer on. The green samples are negative and the red are positive for a particular analyte, say HCB. And we have one participant submit results, and they are all correct and agree with the original result. So they all get the green ticks. The second participant, however, has reported one incorrect result, and they have reported this positive sample as negative. In this case, it is difficult to determine the possible cause of this error. So it could be an individual user error, an instrument error, a specific reagent or lot issue, a reporting issue, or possibly a systematic issue. So when there are very few panel samples, there is limited capacity to identify this possible cause of such errors. However, when we extend the panel and add a couple more positives and a couple more negatives and have 7 samples, for example, we have one participant here and who they reported all correct results except for one, this negative sample, which negative result for a positive sample. And it is most likely that this is a random error that had occurred for participant 1. However, for the second participant, where there are 3 negative results for positive samples, 3 positive samples are all negative. There are no positive samples reported here. Now, this is more indicative of a systematic error that has occurred, and this could be such, for example, a poor performing kit lot or assay sensitivity. Now, using the same panel design, we have a third participant who has 2 incorrect results. Here they have reported positive for a negative sample, and again, positive for this negative sample. So as you can see here, the samples that were incorrectly reported, they're negative, but they follow a true positive sample. And this negative follows a true positive sample. So it is possible that a systematic error has occurred here and may be due to sample carryover. So another aspect to consider when choosing a high quality EQAS is to ensure the provider has a functioning quality management system. So EQAS or proficiency testing providers should be ISO 17043 accredited. They will also have performed the required verifications to ensure their panel samples are of high quality and are both homogeneous and stable, as Sandy previously mentioned. So with regard to samples being homogeneous, that means that during manufacture, the samples are mixed adequately and are evenly distributed so that each participant in that EQAS receives the same sample containing the same quantity or concentration of a particular analyte. And homogeneity testing is used to verify this. And the picture on the right side gives you an idea of what a non-homogeneous sample may look like, where if this material is aliquoted out, you will get varying concentrations of aliquots. The stability of panel samples is about assessing the rate of possible deterioration of the analyte in the samples. So an EQAS provider should ensure that the samples that they provide can generate the same result, whether they are tested on the first day or the last day of that test event schedule. So some factors that can affect the stability of a sample is time and temperature. So shipping and storage times and temperatures need to be validated by the EQA provider for sample stability at their given parameters. Also, things like the virus or the matrix can affect stability. For example, a DNA virus is usually more stable than an RNA virus. So the fourth aspect to look at when choosing a high quality EQAS is to make sure the analysis of results is valid. You want the evaluation of participant results to be based around some consistent rules. These rules should be statistically valid, scientifically relevant, transparent, easily available, and consistently used. So there are two main types of programs that are evaluated very differently. Firstly, there are qualitative programs, which report results such as positive and negative and are used for like serology programs. These are evaluated by comparing the participant result to what is considered the correct result. And you want to ensure that this correct result is scientifically valid. And there are also quantitative programs, such as viral load programs, which report numerical values. Now, these are usually evaluated by comparing the participant results within their peer group or other participants using the same testing platform. And you want to ensure that the statistical evaluation of these results is also valid. So as I previously mentioned, for those qualitative results that are evaluated against a correct result, there are two main ways to obtain this correct result. An EQAS provider can perform reference testing by using one or more validated tests or a testing algorithm to obtain that correct result or characterization of that sample. An EQAS provider may also choose to use consensus results, where they use the participants' results to determine what is the correct result or characterization. And this usually requires at least 80% agreement in the participant results. So here is an example of a situation in which reference results and consensus results do not quite agree. So for example, we have 100 participants testing for anti-HCV. 81 overall, 81 reported negative, 6 reported equivocal, and 13 positive. If we were to use consensus results, there was 81% consensus that anti-HCV is negative. However, in this case, reference testing was performed on a diasarin assay, and that reported in a positive anti-HCV result. So as these do not agree, we chose to break up the results into peer groups. So we have the largest peer group being the Abbott user, 74 reported negative and only 1 positive. We have 7 Roche participants that reported negative results. And then we have Siemens, bioMérieux, and diasarin, who all reported a mix of positive and equivocal results for this sample. So which is better? There are pros and cons to both forms of obtaining the correct results. For reference results, the sample may be tested on multiple assays or following a testing algorithm to confirm that reactivity. And it is important for the EQAS provider to look into the science of what is the infectious agent, what is the best way to determine that correct result, and to also look at all the data. So when NRL EQAS performs result analysis, all factors are taken into consideration from the individual participant level, the peer group level, and the overall result level. And it is possible that biological false reactivity can occur, or the analyte was close to the limit of detection for some assays. Here is an example of one of NRL's qualitative performance reports for a participant reporting anti-HCV using the Abbott assay. Now we have here participant results are submitted on the left. Here is the grading symbol, and we have some peer group counts and reference results here. This is all translated basically into this bar graph, and that is in relation to the peer group results. So this participant reported all results correctly, except for what is highlighted here, sample E. They reported reactive for a negative sample. However, we observed when looking at this peer group that nearly half of the peer group reported reactive also, which is denoted by the pink portion. So looking at the entire peer group results and doing further investigations, we determined it's possibly due to a biological false reactivity. Now, this can occur on any assay, on any sample. So instead of evaluating this affected group as unacceptable or incorrect, we chose to not evaluate this peer group and include a comment on their report as to why. For the evaluation of quantitative results, we normally do this in the form of viral load values, and we evaluate the log 10 form. So for example, if you have 10,000 IU per mil, that's equivalent to 4 log 10 per IU per mil. And participants are evaluated or compared with their peer group, with the evaluation criteria being the peer group mean plus or minus 0.5 log 10. But this is only statistically valid when there are at least 5 results submitted. Here is an example of one of NRL's quantitative performance reports for a participant reporting HCV viral load using the Roche platform. We have, again, the participant results in the log 10 format, their grading symbol. We have some peer group statistics, including some mean, standard deviation, coefficient of variation, and the evaluation criteria here. So all this data in the table is also displayed as a box and whisker plot down the bottom for each sample. And this allows a more visual representation of where the participant result sits in relation to their peer group. And these lines here are the evaluation criteria. So as you can see, sample C is an incorrect result or an unacceptable result with the red cross. And this is because their result is an outlier and it exceeds this evaluation criteria. So the fifth aspect to look at when choosing a high quality EQAS is to ensure there is feedback that supports improvement of testing. This feedback can be in the form of EQAS reports, which should be customized for your results and evaluation. They should be provided within a timely manner after the close of that test event. They should be easy to understand and help you identify potential errors. And they should also provide not only your results, but that of the peer groups and reference results. The EQAS provider should also provide the opportunity and assistance to investigate any issues. They may provide an additional panel sample for testing, so it would be advisable to test the original panel alongside a replacement panel sample in the same test run. But at the end of the day, EQAS is there, as Sandy said, for educational purposes, so the provider should give advice on how to improve testing and testing processes. Responsibilities of participants. So not only is it important to choose a high quality EQAS, but your role in participating in the EQAS is just as important. So it is up to you to correctly identify the panel samples upon arrival at the lab, to follow the EQAS provider's instructions on how to store the samples until testing, as this may affect the sample stability otherwise. And when testing, a provider normally requests that you follow your testing strategy for routine clinical samples and aim to submit your results without delay or error. And once you receive your EQAS reports, it is important that you review them in a timely manner and thoroughly so that you may investigate any potential identified errors. So it is up to you to document that procedure, perform any retesting if required, and report the findings to all the personnel involved. So at NRL EQAS, our quality assurance programs are provided to more than 2,000 participants in over 50 countries. In 2023, we currently have 24 EQA programs. Next year, we'll have 25, and they are grouped into 4 main categories. There are comprehensive serology programs, comprehensive molecular programs, point of care and specialized programs, and our blood screening programs. Here are our 2 blood screening programs, which are both designed specifically for labs that perform blood and tissue screening. The first program, the multi-marker blood screening serology, or MMBS. This program uses human plasma that is validated for ambient shipment and includes 8 markers, 2 for HIV, 2 for Hep C, 2 for Hep B, HTLV, and syphilis. Our second program is the multi-marker blood screening molecular, or NATA. So this program uses frozen human plasma and includes 3 markers. We have HBV DNA, HCV RNA, and HIV RNA, which are all calibrated against the WHO's international standards. Both of these programs provide 10 panel samples for 3 test events in a year, and this allows for a larger capacity for error detection. So now I'll provide a few case studies in which some error detection was observed and investigated. The first case here, we have a false positive result submitted for sample G when testing for HBs antigen. So here we have reactive here, and the reference result is negative. So when investigating the possible cause, we looked at the raw data of the results, the signal to cutoff value, and noticed that following a true positive sample where the signal to cutoff was above 3,000, sample G then had a low reactivity of 3.56. So this is possibly due to sample carryover or contamination, which may be a single random error or indicative of a systematic error. Our second case study shows sample F and G were false positives reported for HBV DNA. Upon further investigations into the raw data, the participant reported signal to cutoff values of 0 for both of these samples. So this indicates a likely transcription error that may have occurred during reporting, and again is possibly a random error. For case study 3, for the detection of anti-rubella IgG in sample D, we have 2 participants here from 2 different peer groups. One peer group using the diasorin assay, who reported mostly reactive results, denoted by the pink portion. The other peer group, this participant was using the Abbott assay and reported mostly negative, inconclusive, or equivocal results. And because this affected mostly an entire peer group, and after some further investigations, and also looking at the reference results too, it was determined most likely an assay sensitivity issue as the sample was close to the cutoff. So the peer group, therefore, was not evaluated with this orange symbol. And a comment here was included as to why. So this indicates a systematic error, and it's important for an EQAS provider to be able to identify these issues. And for the last case study, we have a participant with a false reactive result for sample B. And when looking at the raw data, sample B was reported as 6.19 IU per litre. And another important thing to look at as an EQAS provider is the IFUs for the assays used by participants. And for this case, the cutoff for this IFU is 10 IU per litre. So this was therefore the participant didn't report the results correctly according to the IFU. So again, a comment was added onto their report about this. And again, this could be possibly a single random error, but it is important to note, just in case it is a systematic error, which can affect patient results. So that way the lab can identify the error and improve their processes to decrease these reporting errors. So as a summary, EQAS provides independent assessment of the entire testing process. Not all EQAS are created equal, so it's important to select one that is right for your lab. It is important, again, to maintain communication and teamwork between the EQAS provider and the EQAS participant. And to recap on the 5 things to consider when selecting a high quality EQAS is to make sure that it is fit for your purpose, allows for a large scope of error detection, has a functioning quality management system, ensures valid analysis of results, and the provider gives feedback and advice to support the improvement in testing and testing processes. So I want to thank you all for having me today and listening to this presentation.
Thank you so much. It was excellent overview of this EQAS, the programs, again, how to select EQAS program. We will take some more questions. Just one quick question for you. You mentioned there is some accreditation for the EQAS providers also. So for a participant, it is mandatory or is it necessary to get a EQAS sample from accredited EQAS program, or that's fine? What do you use?
I think most EQAS providers should be accredited. I'm not sure whether it's mandatory. That rules might change in different regions, but you would want to get if you're purchasing an EQAS, you would want them to be accredited to ensure that they are working at the high quality that you're looking for.
Okay, thank you so much. So we'll move on to the next talk for this webinar. Next talk is on fundamentals of EQAS in Indian scenario. For this talk, we have Dr. Gajendra Gupta. He is chairperson of AATM India chapter, and he is running a EQAS program at SDM Jaipur. He is medical director of transfer services at SDM Hospital Jaipur, and this was the first EQAS program started in India for transfusion services years ago. For this, over to you, sir. Please go ahead.
So you are mute.
Sorry, thank you, Ankit. I think now I'm audible. My screen is shared.
Yes, we can see your screen and we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think my talk will be more of repetition of Miss Walker and Portelli talk, because they were talking of what NRL is and what NRL do for the high quality EQAS. I'll be talking the same challenges and the way we actually started a blood bank EQAS for the country in 2009. So we started this EQAS program in 2009. And why this idea of starting an EQAS for blood bank for transfusion services came? Because in 2009, when we were looking around a complete EQAS solution for the country, we came to know that there is no such complete EQAS for the blood bank, which is one-point solution, and we need not have 2 or 3 EQAS provider to actually complete the panel. And few EQAS were there, which were providing immunohematology only, and TTI testing was missing from it. And that's why we came up with the idea of starting an EQAS program. Because in 2008, the accreditation program in India for blood bank was launched. And it was a necessity in that accreditation program that blood bank participates in an EQAS program. So this was the first area where we started our EQAS program for blood bank in India. India, let me tell you, the transfusion services were very dissociated. It was not under one body, though licensing body is one, that's a central level. But the way our transfusion services and our blood banks and blood centers are practicing, they're totally different in different areas. So we started with this program with an objective of actually seeing the performance of the laboratory working in blood testing areas. And we wanted each and every blood bank to actually do a root cause analysis and see how the labs are performing in their blood banks. So as Ms. Walker told, that it starts with the planning of an EQAS. So these were all the points where we started looking around and we started planning that what all should be there in the EQAS, how much number of samples per cycle need to be there in one EQAS, how many types of tests in each cycle, frequency of these per year. So I think while doing all this evaluation, we were starting preparing, and we were simultaneously preparing our documents for quality. So to see that they conform to the standards and we get a good system which works for the benefit of the patient as well as for the continual improvement for the blood banks and their labs. So these were all the documents which were prepared simultaneously, which included staff training, competency, the process of document control, audits and review procedures, operational procedures, even complaint handling, confidentialities and ethics while being an PT provider, everything. And we developed a computer program, how validated the program, that how the results will be evaluated statistically. So this was simultaneously prepared, and simultaneously one more thing came up, that what all should be the test scope. So the test scope was prepared, seeing that majority of the blood bank are doing serology for all these 5 parameters, immunohematology in blood bank, including blood group, cross-match, antibody screening, molecular testing, as well as donor selection areas were also included, though factor VIII and fibrinogen were kept out because majority of our blood bank outsource these tests as their quality assurance. So we started then enrolling the blood bank. So in 2009, we actually invited 70 blood bank to participate in our program. This was by invitation because we knew that majority of the blood bank in country were not aware of such things, and they started seeing it for the first time. But as we started establishing the program, by 2017, we had 487 voluntary participants coming into this program. And then we saw Government of India taking this program from 2018. And now we have total of approximately 1,200 participants of blood bank coming into it, because majority of the blood bank in the country are now a participant into PT provider. But there were challenges, like if we divide country into states, we see the number of participants in each state. This is what is the sample distribution which we kept for an EQAS. So when in 2018, the government came up with this program, so they actually distributed, they saw that there can be 2 PT providers in the country at that time. So 2 PT providers were taken up, CMC Vellore and SDMH, and the blood banks were divided accordingly. So to start with, in 2018, government came up with a pilot project which just had 400 big blood banks participating into it. But after 2 years, seeing the result and seeing the performance of PT provider, one more, the Red Cross, which Cindy Walker was talking, was also included as a PT provider in this program. And then total of 1,300 blood banks, which was government supported public blood banks, they came into picture of getting an EQAS, enrolling themselves in EQAS. So all 3 of the PT provider now had a summary of sample distribution, which was exactly matching. So this all 3 of them sat together and decided that how many number of samples will be there for each test, how many number of cycles will be there per year, which were 3, and when, in which month will the cycle go, so that all 3 of the participants give the same score. Even the scoreboard for all the 3 were also described, and this all of the information were shared with the government in the view that this will be the number of sample, this will be the month of evaluation, and finally this will be the scoreboard. But the results definitely are not shared, they are confidential, as all PT provider do it. So the bigger challenge was, as Ms. Portley was telling, preparation of in-house external control from the plasma. So we had a detailed SOP, we consulted many references for this. and finally came up with our standard operative procedure for preparing these control in-house. Procedures for dispatch of samples were prepared, and then procedure for evaluation of sample were prepared. As we see our country from J&K to South, I think the temperature variations, the environmental condition, they are totally different, and we have a vast country with around about 4,000 blood centers operating, small and big blood centers operating. So this was the distribution finally we were able to achieve in all the state. Majority of the state participated in this EQAS program. Cycle was sent, registration was done. This was, I'm talking of the first cycle, but you can see there were many reasons where blood bank were not participating or they were not coming in, because this was a new thing for them. So few of them didn't understood what they have received. Few of them didn't submitted the application. This was all the reason which we noted, we shared. We tried to remove them year-wise, so that we enhance the program and we roll down and we make people understand that this is very important program, participate voluntarily into it, so that the patient gets the best possible, safest possible blood, and you are very confident of your lab results. That was the reason which we pursued them. And I think we finally were able to capture now, as on now, 90% of the blood bank in the country are definitely providing the result, sharing the result, and coming up as a PT participants. So the main thing, the main reason why I'm saying of India is a very diverse country with diverse environmental condition was a challenge of dispatching the sample. Like in area where I live, the temperature scorch up to 46, 47 in summer's time, which is a normal thing. And the temperature where in north of India, where things are, the temperature goes up to -20. So you have to balance each and every situation so that the samples are received in exactly the situation where, in the position where they are dispatched. So I think the R&D was done into how the sample will go, how they'll travel, how the maintenance of the temperature and the homogeneity of sample will remain. And this was exactly done as per the requirement. So entire process from plasma selection, calcification, filtration, serial dilution check to CE ratio, packaging and dispatch was designed, validated, and then we started in 2009. Guidelines was given to all the users that how to perform a test, which Ankit asked very beautifully, that what is the guideline? Should these samples be treated as an important sample, or should they come through head of the blood bank or blood centers? No. So that's what is the thing. The guidelines was prepared that go according to your normal test run and see, and don't process it as a VIP sample or a very important sample so that you want to get a correct result. Don't repeat it if you don't repeat a normal sample. So all these guidelines were set in. They were dispatched. The PT user were trained into it, that this is the way you have to do and test your samples. Once the sample was tested at the user level and the results were received by us as a PT provider, the statistical evaluation SOP, which was prepared, also was done. And today, going through the Ms. Potterly talk, I understood the second method also of reference method and comparison method, which can be used. So one figure which I saw from her presentation is that 80% user has to confine, though we have never come across a situation when less than this have confined. But this is what is the figure which I saw. So it's good to hear from her that how the statistical evaluation was done. And we prepared a software according to us, and we considered everything as a usual statistical evaluation to give out the results. And this is the final sheet spread which a PT user gets from us of his result compared with the total scoring, which you can see. So all three of the PT provider of the country use this statistics, similar statistics of scoring system and maximum score, so that these are comparable. And all three of PT user participate with each other also to see the comparability between them. And I think we participated with NRL also to begin with for few years to see our EQAS, our PT provider EQAS with this. So this is more of a framework which we developed in India for continual improvement of the testing lab placed in blood bank. Feedbacks from participants is always received. Complaints are addressed. Internal and external audit is always done on an annual basis. Collaborations with other EQAS agencies is done. Statistical tools are always evaluated, and newer parameters, if required, have been upgraded. Like NET, we didn't have at the first go. We added molecular testing after the requirement of a user came up that we needed. So these all complaints, the root cause is always handled accordingly, and this references were taken into for preparing entire guidelines for running this EQAS program, especially for transportation, making of samples and all. So these references were used. Then in 2018, actually, when all three of us met at a central authority office who looks after the blood centers for the country, and actually we gave them a confidence that this program should be rolled out for all public sector blood bank, all government controlled blood bank. And finally they agreed in 2018. And we saw a drastic result after that of improvement of all the blood banks coming into PT participation. This ensured, the guiding authority ensured participations of blood bank. It provided adequate infrastructure to all the blood centers under it for personal contingency and consumables to participate in EQAS program. Finally, they reviewed the data, created a framework of continual improvement and training awareness of participation in EQAS. Though DAC have made it mandatory, but still for a non-supported blood bank, they need to be seeing a funding reason for making it mandatory. Communication by circular emails were done. Follow-up of all blood bank results were done. Follow-up of corrective actions were done by these guiding authority. And finally, we now, as I told you, more than 90% of the blood centers participate in PT program with any one of us, which is the three PT providers established in the country. And the support and the continual improvement which all three of them provides, now we can claim that to begin with, there were 500 odd blood banks of public sector. Now we can claim that all 1,300 blood centers from the public centers are participating in this PT program. So this is where we stand as a country for transfusion medicine EQA program, which is now supported by government, as well as people are coming voluntarily, and we are seeing a good results coming out of these programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a great overview of your EQAS program. And it's very impressive to see the information which you have shared from a small number that's become a large number. Of course, it took years, but yes, finally we are in the position, many centers, many blood centers in our country participating in EQAS program. And of course, we should be thankful to our government authorities who have encouraged all the blood centers to participate over a period of time. But still, we have a long way to go. We have 4,000 blood banks. Still, all of them are not participating in EQAS program. So with this, we start our panel discussion now. So I would first ask any participant has any question. They can unmute yourself, and you can unmute yourself and ask.
Participants would have to write in the chat box, sir.
Oh, they have to write in the chat box. Okay, yes. Thanks, EQAS. So to all the participants, if you have any question, you can write in the chat box and we will ask on your behalf. So just to start the panel discussion, my first question is to Dr. Ms. Sandy Walker. So we were discussing about when a sample comes to the center, we should treat this sample as a VIP sample or not. we started our discussion from that point of view. And then you suggested, okay, we should treat like a regular sample, and the people who are doing the regular testing, those only should do, not only some supervisor or the best performer should perform that particular test. I completely agree with you. So my question to you is, whenever we have any non-conformity or the test result which is not up to the mark from the EQAS, say I consider this my score sheet when I get my EQAS result. So if I don't score up to that level, what I'm supposed to do as a participant?
Great, thank you. It's a great question, and I think that, as Bernadette mentioned, the participants have some responsibility when they participate in an EQAS. It's not just receiving the samples, testing and reporting. It's very important that when the report comes back to them, they look at that very closely to determine if they had the right result or if they didn't have the right result. And if they did have an incorrect result, then they should come up with a process to investigate that. It could be that they design a form so that every time they do an investigation, they do it in the same way. They may design a form for the things that they need to look at and to think about. And they may even contact the EQAS provider and ask the EQAS provider for a second panel. And then they may test the second panel in parallel with the first panel. And that might give them some information to determine if the result was a random result or if perhaps they can repeat that same error. I think it's also really important that when the investigation is completed, that the laboratory takes that report and then they share that with all of the laboratory scientists, and they share what lessons they've learned during the process with everybody in the laboratory. So we recommend that laboratories take their EQAS reports to their monthly laboratory meetings and talk about those reports and use them as a way to educate the other scientists. I might ask Kate or Bernadette, they may want to add something because they run the EQAS at NRL. So ladies, if I've missed something, please go ahead.
Yeah. Miss Portally, do you want to add anything to Sandy?
No, that was very thorough, Sandy.
Thanks.
That's
So
good.
my next question is to Dr. Gajendra Gupta. So what do you think that still we understand the many centers are not participating in India at least, and how to encourage, can we make it mandatory to have to participate in EQAS, and what's the next level, how to go ahead for the centers that are not participating?
I think our authorities are taking note of it, because few of the states drug office where the licensing are there, now they have made it more or less mandatory for licensing and performing of blood bank, at least to participate in EQAS. And I think in India, there has to be a training at peripheral level, which is lacking. Because still at district level, at a smaller blood centers, I can say 80% are participating, but 20% still needs awareness and the confidence of participating in EQAS. And once they start participating, then I have seen the dropouts as minimal. So I think we have to actually encourage one-to-one in these 20% areas and see how we can bring them in. So as I've told you, 90% of blood centers are participating now with any three of us. I think Dr. Narendra Naidu, Dr. Joy, and myself, we are taking care. In our area, I think majority of these blood centers are participating. So we have to pinpoint few and we have to educate them, train them into coming into system. That will definitely.
One question from participants. I think this question is for Sandy, because you're from NRL. So some participant from Sri Lanka, I guess, has asked, do you have a method to cut down the cost of EQAS sample for low-income countries? So I think this question is from Sri Lanka.
Thank you. That's a really excellent question. And I, if you don't mind, might pass this question to Kate, who can talk about what they've done for their low-cost options. Kate, do you mind answering this question? Kate's the team leader of the EQAS programs at NRL. Please go ahead.
I think there's a few different levels I can think of. NRL is actually trying to provide, different programs suitable for, as a central lab or some low middle income countries. I think one of the things we try to do is, for example, our serology programs, which is testing, antigen antibody serology programs, we try to ship them ambient. We validated they are actually stable for shipping ambient, because we think in that way the shipping is a bit cheaper than ship on dry ice. And we, try to validate the samples. They are still, the quality are still as good as, the frozen samples. And also, I think, we, as NRL, I think we actually provide different price. This is maybe talk a bit more, financial, but we actually have different prices. I think this is our kind of, our mission or our aim to help the, especially, in the Asian area, we really try to help to the labs to improve the quality of testing. So that's, I think, if you have any requirement, please feel free to just contact us directly, because we do have different prices. And I think the third thing is, I think Sandy's team did a lot, try to help different regions to develop their own EQAS, because we do agree, because for example, from Australia, the shipping fee, we can't cut the cost. And the samples, sometimes we need to make sure they maintain a high quality. So sometimes I think if you develop the local EQA, I think it is a way to reduce the cost. And I think Sandy in her talk did mention, for example, if you're the central lab or the head lab, that you participate into an international EQA, for example, the NIL ones, and all the small labs, you actually participate in your local one in your country. Then maybe the two tiers make sure the quality match, maybe the more international level. At the same time, you have some, quality measurement in your local level as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate. Just to continue this discussion, I would like to ask Dr. Gajendra Gupta and Dr. Navjyoti Chaudhary is also present. Any initiative whether ATOM would like to take to provide EQAS samples in the region, at least to cut down the cost of shipping, instead of sample travel from Melbourne to Colombo? If sample travel from Mumbai and Delhi to Colombo will be much cheaper, so we can save the cost of at least shipment, and maybe transport also, maybe simpler and easier and less logistics involved in this. So is there any plan to do such thing from ATOM side?
I think Dr. Navjot, this question is for you. Dr. Navjot. Okay, but I think Ankit, we had a meeting, and I think NRL, we had a meeting. And let me tell you, I'll just see. Let me tell you, when we started this EQAS, I think Ms. Walker and Ms. Potley will be knowing. I think Wendy and Lee Best, I think they both visited our site and guided us. Means NRL was the main guiding force in telling us how to start it. And believe me, there was, I created a notes of round about 48 points. I still remember what I got from both of them. And before we started with this program, so still I can say that on our program, NRL is still the guiding force which we use. But I think Navjot is there. He'll answer your question that can ATOM start such program, I think. Navjot.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, probably I have got a negative report. That's why I could stop me from, speaking. But that is a lighter way. Actually, I could not speak. See, actually, we started this exercise almost 7-8 years back. We got samples from two sources. Initially, we got samples from NRL. We distributed to some of our, member countries like Bhutan, Nepal, and Bangladesh, as well as Sri Lanka. That was almost 2010, 12, something like that. But however, it is very, very expensive. We didn't have a resource. Then we tried to do it, Ministry of Health, Thailand. And we distributed their sample for 2 or 3 cycles. Again, we could not afford. At this moment, if we get a sponsor, for this, cost of transportation, we are happy to do that. But at this moment, we do not see any resource. However, this is the main reason we are actually starting our relationship with NRL for EQAS. If the country, that's why we already circulated the message that any country want to start EQAS without a conflict. Why we are saying without a conflict? Because in some countries, they are directly, communicating to NRL, or maybe directly communicating with the WHO. If they are not in that line, then definitely we'll connect them with NRL so that EQAS process can be started. That process we can be the mediator, but we cannot at this moment, due to resource constraint, we cannot help directly for transportation of sample. Over to you, Ankit.
Thank you so much. We don't see any more questions from the participants. I again announce, if any participant has any question, can write in the chat box. We can wait for 1 minute and then we can close this webinar. So before we...
I have a small question.
Yeah, yes, please.
We've talked about what to do by the participant, the responsibility of the participant. Once there's a fault is found, that there's some deficiency in the report that is sent by the, the provider. But what to do if everything is 100 by 100? We just simply ignore and continue doing it, or there is some, I'm asking this question with a sense of skepticism, that do we just be confident that whatever we are doing is right, nothing else needs to be done, or there is still something that we need to be careful about?
I think I can answer this question. I think, yeah, of course, normally if your answer is all correct, all correct, in our reports is all like green ticks, then that means you perform really well. Especially for, speaking for NRL programs, we have 10 samples and 3 test events in a year. So you pretty much tested 30 samples. And if you test everything is correct, I think, you don't have, you don't need to worry too much, because it does show your system, your practice, your lab performance are in a very good level. But just for adding that, in our NRL reports, we do compare the values as well. For example, in serology, we do actually compare the sample to cutoff, for example, or we will have some graph or some mean values in the peer group, which means everyone does the same as using the same assay. So sometimes, although all the serology program or even molecular programs, they are qualitative programs, but this value sometimes does give you some information. For example, if everyone's sample to cut off is 2, you are 200, or vice versa. Maybe you will look at it, say, oh, why my results is very different from others. If it happens all the time, then maybe you need to think, oh, is there anything, maybe raise the alarm. We're always happy to help, as we said, when you have these questions, like, oh, why, my peer group looks like the average is mean value very different from mine. We normally will provide you more details, so you can have a look if there's any concern, potential issues for the future. That's, I think, my answer, if anyone want to add as well.
Yeah. Aikaj, I want to add things. I think this reminds me of one of the slide of Sandy, where we see quality assurance as a bigger bracket, then an EQAS, then an internal, and then an QC. I think EQAS just cover one part of it. If you get 100 by 100 in EQAS, doesn't mean that quality assurance is good. Because quality assurance, as you remember in the slide where Sandy shows, quality assurance is a bigger bracket, and you have to, as a blood center, you have to see it. So when we say that we should sit and relax, it is when a QA bracket is complete, not just an EQAS result. I hope you understand that. So that's where we have to act.
Can we party on the weekend if we get 100% score from EQAS?
Yeah, on a party on a weekend is done.
Sandy, please add.
In the same note, I must appreciate Dr. Gajendra Gupta sir, the way they send us the reports. They also send us where we are with the Z score. Like how many SDs do we break? Are we there within 2 SDs of the total cohort? So I think that can give us certain respite.
I think, but I think there is a great learning from NRL again, because our system has to mature to a big level. We are still, it's a very established system. I've seen NRL in and out, as Ankit was telling, we keep on peeping on their website all the time to get something out of, some learning out of it, and attending their programs. I think the system of maturity is still the confidence between the participant and the PT provider has to develop. The dealing means the statement from a PT provider to the participant need to be very clear, like the comments which I think Portelli have showed us in the case studies. They need to be detailed workup for a mature system, I think. And that's something which we need to do and we need to learn.
In the same breath, I'll also request Dr. Navjyoti Chaudhary sir. So if we could have ATM act as a conduit within from NRL to Asian countries, where we could actually take the samples from NRL and distribute over them through our channels. That will, kind of help us all reaching the same level as NRL. I mean, the participants who want to participate with NRL can maybe cut down on costs also.
No, actually, that is not our ball game. They are specialized. We should not touch and let them do it. That's why, rather than have a conduit, it's a direct connections. So there's no conduit, and this is a different ball game. I mean, they're specialized for last 50, 60 years, and we are the end users. Before we close down, Ankit, can we have a comment from Narendra Naidu, because he's quiet for the whole time. Dr. Narendra, would you like to make a comment? You are silent throughout.
Yes, I would join definitely. 1 minute. Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. We can see you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I must say that I'm in debt to NRL for having given me the training and way back in 2002. Yes, and we learned a lot from Sandy, and not only they just trained us in the beginning, but they did a lot of hand-holding for me whenever I was in trouble. Each year I would just keep asking them, okay, now here I'm stuck, how do I give opinion? And they've been so patient and really so good to have helped me throughout. And so far, I've been able to achieve that maturity that Dr. Gajendra Gupta was talking about, and TTI, at least I would say confidently. We did start the Immunomat program late because my focus was mainly TTI. So I continued working on TTI until our NBTC shook me off and said, hello, you cannot participate until you run the Immunomat also. So that also I developed it with the WHO guidelines that was there online. And so far been able to do it. And truly so because of a strong backing from Sandy all the while. And of course, I have a lot of good support staff. The hands that work behind this, they haven't changed since so many years. So that gives me the kind of confidence in the samples that we send and the reporting that we do with the detailed analysis. So I'm thankful to NRL and really indebted, but unfortunately, I have not been able to spread the program widely across the country simply because we did not have much of marketing skills though, or we did not have much of help in spreading out a word of our program. So that's why we were quite limited until quite some time, until NBTC got us into the picture. So I would like to thank NRL, Sandy, and NBTC also for having given me the opportunity to be able to work for the country, and would wish to continue working if given an opportunity. So,
Thanks,
thank
ma'am.
you.
In between, I guess Sandy had some comment, and we moved ahead. Sandy, if you are here, if you have any comment.
Thank you. I was just going to add a comment about if we get all of our results correct for the year, can we go and have a party? And my comment was around EQAS is looking at the performance of your testing at a point in time. So you may have got all the results correct for that year, but next year you may have new staff come in, you might change your equipment, you might start introducing new technology, you might have reagent lots which don't perform as well. And so I think it's fantastic if we can have great results for a year, but I don't think that necessarily means that you're going to have great results next year or the year after. So I really think it's a quality journey, and it's not just an annual program. We need to continue to make sure that as changes occur to our systems, we pick up any issues. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We are almost at the end of the webinar program. Now, before we end, I request Ms. Kate Zhang to say a few closing remarks from NRL.
Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to present. And also thank my colleagues, Sandy and Bernadette, and also Dr. Gupta to the presentations. So I think hopefully like everyone liked their presentations. And, for me to listen to Dr. Gupta's presentation is, I think it's really, really impressed. I think, I think actually, you and your group did a great job for your local PT program. As our director, Philip Hessel said in the beginning, at the heart of all blood supplies is effective donor selection and screening. It is very important. So within screening, the most important pillar is the quality of testing blood donations for pathogens. So I think quality is a long journey, as Sandy said. Speak for, I think, all our presenters today. As we are the EQAS PT providers, we really do have the passion, not only developing the EQAS, but also try to helping all the laboratories to improve the quality of testing. So, we really would like to, go with all the labs along the journey of improving the quality. So we are very glad for the first webinar, co-hosted by AATM and NRL. I know there's always some difficulties like the sample sourcing or the cost of the panels, but we really look forward for the future collaboration with all of you and all of your labs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kate. So, thank you so much. So with this, we are at the end of the webinar. From Atom side, I would like to thank to all the experts from NRL and as well as Dr. Gajendra Gupta. And I hope we can continue this academic journey with NRL. If not, at least the samples can come, but at least experts can join together for some for the academic discussion. Will be wonderful for the people in India and other atom countries. So listen you and learn something from you. With this, I think we can close. Yeah.
Ankit, can we have a, snap for everybody can open their camera so we can have a snap. This will go to our newsletter. if everybody can do that.
So who is taking the photo?
Oh, Ankit or
I will take it. I will take it.
there are photographers already in this group.
So I would request Chu Kwong Lee, Dr. Hetzel, Yasra, Shashika, Disha Patel, Pierre Wong, everybody else, Preeti Desai.
Yeah.
Please switch on your cameras. And we click in 3, 2, 1. Great.
Thank you.
And I agree fully with Dr. Sandy Walker. Quality is a journey, and we are glad to have NRL as our guiding light. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
See you.